Session. We do have quorum. I'm going to call the meeting to order. So I want to advise those in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode and that all devices are to be muted. It is not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. In terms of apologies, we have an apology from Daniel McCrossan and Michelle McElveen. Are there any other apologies that anyone's aware of? Oh, okay, thank you. And via Zoom, I think we will have Aoife. Declarations of interest. I would remind you of your responsibility to declare any interests in any of today's items under discussion. Do any members have any items of interest they want to declare?
Mr. Chairman, I declare an interest in a partner in a farm business.
Thank you, William.
Yeah, declaring just as an executor and owner of a small farm.
Excellent. Thank you, members. Okay, Chairperson's business, item number 1. Before we proceed with the meeting, I wish as Chair to say a few words about our member, William Irwin, who we learned this week is stepping down from his role as MLA and, of course, as a member of this committee. A committee he first joined in May 2007. It was an all-male committee at that stage. It was chaired by William McRae MP and chaired, William, you chaired the committee between 2014 and 2016?
That's correct.
Brilliant. Michelle has already spoken in the chamber this week about William talking of his roots in agriculture and his being the authentic voice of the rural community, and certainly that has been the case since my time as chair. I can only agree and thank him for his contributions, for our discussions and for the consideration of a huge range of significant policy areas, even when his wee further question, the wee one at the end, William, every time I'll miss that. So on behalf of the committee, the wider assembly and constituents of Newry and Armagh, William, thank you for your service. We wish you a long and happy retirement with Olive and your wider family and friends, though I doubt you'll be putting your feet up, and thank you for your final declaration of interest on this committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's with sadness that I step down, but I feel a few health issues. And I feel it's time for me to step down. I've enjoyed the committee. I've worked, hopefully, constructively within the committee for the better good of agriculture and the environment and rural affairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, members. Okay. Yep. Okay, members, I refer you to page 6 of the pack. To correspondence from Pilgrims Europe requesting to meet with the committee to discuss delays to poultry house planning applications and to raise concerns in relation to issues on the export of poultry litter to the Republic of Ireland. They also raised the issue of wider planning delays that are significantly impacting investment on local farms across Northern Ireland. And this matter was raised by Declan at last week's meeting when the Minister attended. Members, have you any comments, or are you content to add this to our forward work programme? Yep. Thank you, members. Item number 3, I refer you to page 8 of the pack to correspondence on behalf of ENVA, dated the 8th of December, regarding an invitation to the committee to visit its fridge recycling operation in Toonbridge. Members will recall we previously agreed to add this to our forward work plan and seek to agree a suitable date sometime early next year. Are members content with that? Thank you. Agenda item 4 is the minutes of the 4th of December. I refer you to the draft minutes from our meeting on the 4th of December at page 9 of the pack. Have you any comments, or are you content with the minutes as drafted? And if so, I'm going to sign them and they then will be published on the website. Thank you, members. Okay, thank you. Okay, matters arising then. Item number 1, I refer you to your pack to an update of the legislation overview for September to December 2025. Provides members with details relating to delegated legislation we have considered this term and will continue to consider into the new year. There is a full sweep of legislative instruments with SRs, LCMs and SI, and the environmental principles with its own scrutiny timetable. Have you any comments, or are you content to note? Thank you, members. Item number 2, I refer you to page 22 of the pack to a note of the informal event with farmers and the UFU representative on their concerns regarding the management of TB. We held that on the 2nd of December. Members received the note by email on Friday. The committee agreed a number of actions. They include to invite rural support to the committee to talk about their work, and also the Northern Ireland Meat Exporters Association to hear from them about their work and the impact of cattle making it to the slaughterhouse before lesions are discovered. Have you any further comments, or are you content to note, members? Thank you. Item number three, I refer you to page 3 of table papers to correspondence from the Minister dated the 9th of December regarding the OEP investigation into sewage discharges into Belfast Lough. This is in response to our query about actions taken by the Department alone or in conjunction with the Department for Infrastructure and the Utility Regulator. To date, and those that are planned, the Minister advises that to date DAERA have been asked by OEP to action 8 specific information requests to supply details about its guidance documents, legal considerations, review processes, compliance checks and findings, any enforcement actions taken, identified limitations, correspondence with regulators and post-implementation reviews. Have you any comments, or are you content to note at this stage, members?
Content.
Yep, thank you. The Committee for Infrastructure notes that we wrote to Minister Muir on the matter and requested a copy of the correspondence once we have received, so are members content to forward a copy? Thank you, members. Okay, item number 4, refer you to page 6 of table papers to correspondence from the Department dated the 8th of December in response to our request for detail on the number of inspectors available for bee inspection work. The Department states that there are 3 members of staff in the Agricultural Inspectorate trained to carry out bee inspections as part of their overall duties. This will increase to 4 or 5 on completion of the recruitment competitions. However, the increased resource will not be used to provide additional services such as routine apiary surveillance beyond statutory obligations. Have you any comment, or are you content to note? I would also add, Clerk, if we could just update the Beekeepers Association that was with us a number of weeks ago, just in terms of that. Yep. They may already be aware, but just to keep them in the...
I agree to forward the response.
Am I happy enough to forward that response, members? Yep, thank you. Item number 5, I refer you to table paper starting at page 9 for the draft Committee LCM Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Bill report. Members, last week the Committee agreed to support the Minister in seeking the Assembly's endorsement of the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Bill legislative consent motion. As you will recall, this bill provides the legal framework for the UK to fully implement its international obligations under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. Officials have drafted the required report for agreement by the Committee and subsequent publication. Does the Committee agree to the contents and the publication of the report? Yeah, thank you, members. Item number 6, I refer you to table papers at page 23 to correspondence from the Department dated the 10th of December regarding the Waste Fees Charges Amendment number 2 Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. Members will recall that the Committee agreed on the 6th of November that it was content with the SRs drafted and that it be approved by the Assembly. The increase in fees for 25-26 is higher than the standard inflationary measure, and therefore regulations are to be led by the draft affirmative procedure, and the debate in the Chamber will take place on the 12th of January. Are you content to note, members?
Yep.
Thank you. So, members, before we move into our consideration of the first of the SL1s today, I just remind members that there will be changes to the SL1 process commencing in the new year. These changes are designed to strengthen the scrutiny process, increase transparency with the publication of SR proposals, and the new call for views, survey and improve the information received by committees to assist them in their scrutiny. There will be a minimum 4-week timeframe, providing space for committee considerations of proposals for SRs, consideration of stakeholder responses to the call for views, survey and to hear evidence from witnesses if required. The calls for views survey will be identical for all SL1s and ask: is the information provided by the Department accurate? Is the information provided by the Department complete? And will implementing the rule lead to any unintended or unanticipated consequences? Content, members?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Members, agenda item 6 is the SL1, the Sustainable Farming Investment Scheme Regulations. I refer you to the pack starting at page 26 of the SL1, the draft SR and the explanatory memorandum. Members will recall that officials previously briefed the Committee on policy proposals for the scheme on the 11th of September. The Department intends to make this SR under the negative resolution procedure to introduce the Sustainable Farming Investment Scheme. I now welcome the following officials to the meeting and invite them to brief the Committee. We have Joy Alexander, the Deputy Director of Sustainable Agri-Food Development Division, and Brenda Cunning, Head of Future Investment Measures Policy Branch. Thank you very much for your attendance, and if you're ready, you could brief the Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So thank you for the opportunity to outline proposals for legislation to underpin the Sustainable Farming Investment Scheme. So I'm going to give a very short introduction, and then Brenda will cover the key points of the draft regulations. Just at the outset, I would just like to highlight that the scheme proposals are still subject to business case approval and budget availability. So as you said, excuse me, as you said earlier, my colleague Alison Chambers, along with Brenda, previously provided an overview of scheme proposals on the 11th of September, but just thought it might be helpful maybe just to recap on a few of those key points, if that's okay. So the Sustainable Farming Investment Scheme will support incremental investments from a specified list of equipment and technology, and aims to support investment across farm sectors and sizes. So that's seeking to ensure that smaller farmers are also supported. The scheme will seek to support a reduction in GHG, ammonia and nutrient losses, and we envisage co-benefits for participants of the scheme in terms of increased innovation, increased efficiency, improved animal welfare and health, and or improved plant health. We're proposing a grant rate of 40% with a maximum grant amount of $25,000 available across the scheme. We're developing a simple application process with the aim of having a quick turnaround of funding. This scheme represents phase 1 of investment support under the Sustainable Agriculture Programme. A separate phase 2 scheme will be developed through engagement with industry and learning from ongoing initiatives and research. And that will support larger transformative investments, including emerging technologies. The proposed legislation would be made through the negative resolution process under Section 6 of the Agriculture Act Northern Ireland 1949 and sets out the framework for the operation of the scheme. As required by the 1949 Act, the regulations must be approved by the Department of Finance. Development of the business case, as I said earlier, is ongoing, and it's anticipated that we will seek approval from Department of Finance for the business case and the legislation at the same time in the new year. So subject to the necessary approvals, we would hope to have a soft launch in early 2026. If there's any questions, or I'll hand over to Brenda to...
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, as Joy said, this is kind of a framework approach to the legislation which sets out powers and actions the department can take, and also various things that the applicant must do in order to be successful under the scheme. Regulation 2 sets out definitions used within the SR, including several terms related to applicants and beneficiaries. Regulation 3 and 4 allow the department to pay financial support to an applicant who has been successful under the scheme and subject to conditions set by the department. While it is currently proposed that payments will be made in one lump sum upon completion of a successful claim, the legislation provides the option for the department to pay by instalment. Regulation 5 provides that an application must be made to the department or to an external delivery agent if that option was used in a form set by the department and must contain all required information. For the scheme, we are developing an online application and claim system which will be simple and straightforward for farm business to access and use. We will seek to minimise the information required from applicants, but will need to gather baseline information so that we can help with scheme evaluation. Regulation 6 allows the department to approve an application in whole or part and with or without conditions so that financial support can be provided. The standard process is that a letter of offer would be issued to successful applicants detailing the amount of support offered and the items for which approval has been given. This provision also allows the department or delivery agent to vary an approval. However, the department must engage with the beneficiary before making any such variation. Regulation sets out that a claim must be made when and how the department requires. In essence, this means that a claim must be submitted via the online system before the final claim submission date, as set out within the letter of offer sent to successful applicants. Regulation 8 requires a beneficiary to supply necessary information, for example, details of cost paid for an investment, installation date, location, etc. Application and claim requirements and conditions referred to in the preceding regulations will be fully explained within scheme guidance and online resources so that an applicant is aware of all requirements before submitting an application or a claim. The online system will guide and prompt an applicant as much as possible, and contact details will be available should further help be required. Regulation 9 and 10 detail powers of an authorised person. That's someone who may be acting on behalf of the department with regard to pre- or post-payment inspections, to enter premises and to inspect documents, etc. These powers rely on Section 40-1 of the Agricultural Act, Northern Ireland 1949. These provisions and the definition of authorised person take account of comments from the Examiner of Statutory Rules on legislation for other schemes made under the 1949 Act. Under Regulation 11, a beneficiary must retain documentation related to a supported investment for a minimum period of 5 years. This aligns with the requirement under Regulation 12 for equipment to be retained for a similar period of time. Regulation 13 sets out situations where, for example, the department may determine that there has been a breach of conditions, false information has been submitted, or an investment is unlikely to be completed. The regulation requires the department to engage in writing with beneficiary before making such a determination and to consider information provided in response. In cases where the department has made a determination that a breach has occurred, Regulation 14 provides powers to withhold or recover payment and to impose a penalty. The penalty would fall within the matrix previously outlined to the committee and ranges from a warning letter to a 100% penalty. The department can also terminate an approval and, in cases, for example, of false information, exclude the beneficiary from the scheme for a period of 2 years. Regulation 15 and 16 provide that the department may recover any amounts due to be paid as a civil debt and may also recover interest on any recoverable payments made to the beneficiary. Regulation 17 allows any amount due to a beneficiary under the scheme or otherwise payable to the beneficiary by the department may also be used to pay off or offset any amount due under Regulation 15 or 16. Regulation 18 sets out timing and requirements around review of decisions to reject an application to the scheme. The schedule to the regulation sets out a number of scheme design features, which we've previously outlined to the committee. This includes the grant rate, the minimum and maximum project costs, and the overall maximum grant available under the scheme. As noted in the SL1 letter, these aspects in particular are subject to the final business case. The scheme will be open to primary food production across agriculture and horticulture sectors. A Category 1 farm business ID will be required to access the scheme. This requirement will be communicated well in advance of scheme opening. The scheme will be based on a list of pre-selected eligible items which the department has assessed and scored and for which grant will be available based on a reference price sourced by the department across a range of suppliers. The scheme gives some information on, the schedule gives information on eligible costs, for example, new items on the eligible list for which a successful applicant has received a letter of offer, and on costs which are not eligible for support, such as ongoing operating costs or VAT. Scheme guidance, terms and conditions, and a successful applicant's letter of offer will set out full details of all eligible and ineligible costs. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. I had a couple of questions, but there's written down, but there's a couple of things just occurred to me. We're going to take we'll be dealing with the farm sustainability standards regulations later on in the committee, and obviously this is the farm investment scheme regulations, which is different. But is there a crossover then in regard to penalties, for instance? So is it the same matrix, but it only applies to this scheme, or is there a danger that if you fall foul under this scheme, that might trip something in the other regulations?
Okay, so no, they're completely separate.
Okay.
What we've sought to do is make sure that we're kind of aligning, we're taking the same kind of approach, but they are completely separate schemes and penalties.
Because I think there's been some good work done, to be fair, in terms of that matrix about, the warning letters and that. And then following that, in terms of if someone falls into the sort of the auspice of a letter or a refusal, is there an appeals process? Is there something quite straightforward in terms of challenging the department then?
Absolutely. So
Yep.
that's part of that, that we have to actually engage with somebody before we would determine that there's been a breach first off. So we have to write to them and they can write back, make representations before we would actually impose any penalties. And obviously then if they still were unhappy, they could still write to us and challenge that. But any kind of decisions that is based very much on any representations made back. So for example, if somebody hasn't fulfilled part of their letter of offer, there may be very good reasons for that rather than being charged with a decommitment penalty, perhaps something's happened on the farm or the supply has gone, whatever it might be, that they can't get the equipment, that's taken into account and therefore the penalty wouldn't be applied.
Okay, excellent. In the regulations which will set out the list of eligible equipment technologies, you did refer to emerging technologies. So how will the list be, how easy will it be for the regulation to be amended and updated to reflect the emerging technologies?
So that's actually why we have not included the list within the regulations. I know that some other schemes have maybe got theirs in their schedule, but because this is an evolving picture, we didn't want to do that. And that was something that stakeholders actually raised with us, that, you know, how do we, from one round to the next, add things on? So we have a separate list that's published separately ahead of scheme opening, and that's what we refer to.
So in terms of those stakeholder engagements then, and we're going to do a new process in the new year where we'll have a bit more time and a bit more access to stakeholder voices and that. Could you be open with us in terms of any limitations or challenges that stakeholders have raised in regards to this, or any changes that you've affected? Because I know you've worked pretty hard on this.
Yeah, we've had a lot of engagement through the Agricultural Policy Stakeholder Group. I think we've met with them about 5 times, possibly over the last year and a half. So in terms of challenges, I suppose one of the biggest concerns for stakeholders was that the scheme would be as broad as possible across sectors. We've often heard that. What if horticulture, for example, isn't competing against livestock? And we've been very careful with how we've scored items to make sure there are items across the board for all sectors. Another concern probably would have been about smaller farmers, to make sure that there's enough, and that's where we have proposed reducing the minimum project cost. So under previous schemes it would have been £5,000. We've now proposed lowering that to £3,000. So we have made those adaptations. Others, I suppose it's the amount of support. Everybody would always like more support to be available, but working through the business case, what we've come to is this 40% grant rate. They've asked about the £25,000 maximum. You know, is that enough? And to be honest, for some types of investment, it won't be. But that's where we get into phase 2 for those bigger transformative investments. So I'm thinking of most recently talking to the mushroom sector. They're looking at automation. That won't even scratch the surface. Or some of the arable ones as well. They've got very big harvesting machines. So that's where we look at phase 2. So it's that scope. But this is, we think, sufficient for these small incremental investments that we can get launched across a broad range of farm businesses, farm sizes, quickly is the key thing.
And I think, and the top level figure is, I think, £44 million.
It's 40 million of capital.
40 million of capital, okay. And are there any pressures on that at the moment that you're aware of? I didn't pick up anything in the Finance Minister's report of this week, but obviously you guys are a wee bit closer to the DAERA figures.
Well, we're still, as we said at the outset, we're still in the process of getting business case approval, and we've put bids in for funding, so the process is underway.
Okay. Oh, no problem. Thank you very much. I'm content with that. Declan?
Yeah, thank you. You kind of touched on the question I was going to ask about ensuring that smaller farmers, you know, are part of the scheme. They always would have been part of your consultation exercise as well. And obviously you have the option of going down as low as £3,000 as well, as, you know, to facilitate maybe smaller part-time farmers as well.
Yeah, and we're looking at the range of equipment as well, that, you know, this isn't all very high-end stuff. So that's actually why we think the 25,000 limit's quite good, because there will be smaller investments made, so that's going to average it out. And we're conscious as well about sheep farmers, that there's equipment there for them. They can be off from smaller farms. So yeah, that's where we've looked at the range of equipment and then also financial limits to try and take that in. In terms of the APSG, it would represent smaller farmers on that stakeholder group to give that feedback.
And see, in terms of unforeseen circumstances and spending or whatever, and things can happen, climate or whatever, what flexibilities are there for unforeseen circumstances?
In terms of rollout of the scheme, or for an applicant, or both? An applicant? Well, absolutely. What we've made clear, and would be very clear in online resources, within the guide, but within the system as well, stay in contact with us. Things can happen. You know, you might apply, you might get your letter of offer, and best will in the world, you can't get the third item on it, or something's happened to the markets and you can't afford it anymore. Contact us. We would do, you know, work through that, give extensions if that was necessary, whatever it might need to be. But the key thing is to stay in contact.
And just following on from that as well, you mentioned about the reference prices. Is there any flexibility for farmers who may want to provide quotes who could get a more competitive price than what's from the price and reference guide?
We have actually talked about that at APSG. Difficulty would be mixing and matching it. So if we were doing reference prices for some people and then somebody else was bringing in a quote, is that going to be a different price then? They could potentially be getting more grant than somebody else using reference pricing. But more fundamentally than that, using quotes is just a lot more administration for farmers, for suppliers and for the scheme. We would not be able to roll out the scheme as quickly. Basically, because we've got the reference prices, everybody knows what the grant they're applying for. They put that through. Almost as soon as the scheme closes, we know the grant amount that we're looking to seek against that bid that we've made, and we can make decisions then about letters of offer a lot faster than if we were having to administrate quotes. Are they comparable quotes? You know, is there any issues with the quotes provided? So we don't want to go down the quote road. It's too administratively burdensome for us, for applicants and for suppliers.
So you expect this to open for applications early in the new year?
That's the aim. We'd want to do a soft launch first, because there's a few things we want to explain about the scheme ahead of time, even things like the Category 1 Farm Business ID, and if somebody was considering using an agent, how can they do that? Just to let people know more about the scheme. So we want to do a soft launch first, and then a period of time after that to open the scheme for applications. And people consider their investment needs as well.
Just to really give people that time to prepare and get themselves ready.
Early in the year?
Again, it comes back to budget and business case approvals. But we'll be going as early as we possibly can.
Yeah, we've got a lot of moving parts at the minute.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Exactly. William.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's very welcome, and it's welcome news. I mean, 40 million grant aid to farmers is a big help, and not only that, but it's 100 million spent in the wider economy in Northern Ireland in the main, so it certainly is very welcome. In the past, there may have been a wee bit of criticism that there wasn't enough items for horticulture. Have you looked at that to maybe expand the possibility of more items in horticulture?
Yeah, we have. Working very closely with some of the stakeholders as well who've suggested items so that we can consider them. And also then CAFRE advisors. CAFRE advisors are giving us advice on the whole range of sectors, but anything that's out there, there might be some things that are quite novel as well that we don't have in Northern Ireland, so we want to make sure we can try and see can we put those on the list. So yeah, very conscious that we want to expand it for horticulture and arable in particular.
That's good. In relation to you're hoping to open the scheme early in the year, that could be March, but irrespective of when it is, how long do you expect it to be open for? Period.
It'll have a short opening period. So under Tier 1 of FBIS, it was usually about 4 to 6 weeks, and we'd see it be in the same kind of time frame because it's such a simple application. So say 6 weeks, people get in, get their applications done, it closes, and then we can look at letters of offer quickly after
What
that.
happens to be oversubscribed? How do you?
If it's oversubscribed, yes, so we would have an indicative budget that we would be putting against round 1, for example. The applications are scored based entirely on the items selected, so they'll be ranked.
Okay.
And then we'll have to draw a cut-off point.
Okay.
And again, as part of the soft launch, to make sure that everybody's aware of the window and, as we say, that there's sufficient time to get all the bits and pieces put together.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Thomas?
Yeah. Does the farmer have to pay up front and then be reimbursed on this?
It is actually, yes. So they would have to pay 100% of the investment themselves, purchase it, and then we would reimburse the 40% grant rate, just standard under the type of schemes we usually run.
What is the timeline then for them to wait on the payment coming to them?
We would make it as quick as possible, and I think under Tier 1, it was a fairly quick turnaround for that. Again, online processes, and what we would give them guidance is that if you've got one invoice for the piece of equipment and you can show that one item going out of your bank account, it's much quicker to get that paid off rather than having to wade through a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, and just in the business of it being oversubscribed, if it's oversubscribed, do you take it as on the basis of the applications that come in and when they come in? You know, because if it's oversubscribed, there are going to be people who's going to lose out. So how do you determine then who actually gets and who doesn't get?
This is not a first come, first served. This is based purely on what people have applied for. So the window opens, the window closes, all the applications in at that stage then are looked at in terms of what they've selected.
Okay. And then when does round 2 open? Again, is there going to be a long time frame before? Is there a round 2?
There is hopefully to be a round 2. Any decisions over when that would open would be determined on the uptake for round 1 and also how well the claims are processing under round 1. You know, if for example we found there was a particular issue with people getting the equipment, something happens to the markets, might have to delay it, but if we can bring it forward, that would be even better. We want to try and get this as rapidly delivered as possible.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Aoife? Anya? I told you last word.
You're at it again.
Anya.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick query in relation to the scoring matrix. And I suppose there will be an emphasis on lessee equipment within this grant scheme and non-lessee equipment. When do we expect to actually see the score matrix? Will it be transparent or will it be published?
So in terms of the scoring, we don't really have a matrix as such, it's just every single item and that will be on the list. So when the list of items is published for the opening of the scheme, there'll be a score attributed to each item. What we're going to potentially do for lessee is slightly different. So I talked the last time about we were splitting lessee from non-lessee items so that, you know, somebody's application's not getting dragged down if they want a non-lessee item, lessee as well. So we're going to split them. So we're going to score them separately. Everything's based on an item score, but because obviously lessee, they all have the same item score because they're the same item. There's slight differences between a slurry injection equipment that's slightly better for ammonia as opposed to a trailing shear dribble bar. But what we're thinking of doing there, so we can prioritise, is look at livestock units in combination with the item score. So that will prioritise those who have a higher number of livestock units and therefore producing more slurry. Therefore, we get more benefit from them using lessee on it if that's necessary. So the scores will be known as soon as the list is published in terms of the items. And then applicants can look at their own livestock units and know their potential scoring there. But that ranking report won't be known until we actually know who the applicants are who actually apply.
Thank you, Chair.
No problem, thank you. John?
Following on, Chair, from Tom's question there, what's the precedent or examples set from previous similar schemes in terms of a cut-off point or where the number of applications might exceed the available resource?
Okay, so under FBIS Capital Tier 1, whenever it was first launched, there were 2 tranches to be rolled out for £15 million. So it was taken that would be 7.5 million and 7.5 million. And those 2 first tranches more or less worked out that way. And what happens as well is that we would often overcommit slightly for a tranche because we know there's always a little bit of decommitment, it's natural. And then we would be able to bump up the second. But for tranche 3 of that happened in 2020, so it was supply was affected by COVID, by Ukraine, all of that. So it was a longer time frame for rollout, but also there were a lot more applications. So originally it was supposed to be, I think, 7.5 million as well. The decision was taken based on the number of applications to increase the budget there to cover a bit more of those. So it's all quite fluid until we know who's applied for what.
So if the projected cost based on the number of applications was reasonably slightly over the budget, a variation could be made for that then in those circumstances. Okay.
Brilliant. I've got 2 wee questions. I'm going to do William. I've got 2 wee questions. You see the habits that you're going to leave. This is your legacy, William. Just 2 wee ones. I think I remember from the previous meeting I asked around a specific idea. So it was like the slots, the grooved slots that promote animal welfare. Is that the type of thing that we're talking about in terms of the animal welfare space? And I imagine that there is a list and obviously it's not being published at the minute because it's a moving feast.
It is.
But the animal welfare piece is something that I'd be really interested in. The second piece is, the Minister was here last week and I'd introduced and asked him a question about Natural England's principles around betterment, mitigation and betterment for planning. It occurred to me that this might be part of a jigsaw for unlocking the logjam for planning. Has there been any crossover in intra-departmental work in that space?
Yeah, we're actually very engaged with the folks working on the ammonia strategy and on that review and all of that piece. And it's something that's actually a main driver for the scheme is ammonia reduction. And the ammonia strategy, obviously, the proposals there are about less say, but there's also proposals in it in terms of more use of scrapers, types of ammonia reduction flooring, and also covering tanks. So we are actually very aligned with that. We're also aligned with other types of schemes where they might be wanting to bring in biosecurity. You know, so we're looking at a wildlife proofing package, which would be for the TB aspect. So yeah, we're fingers and lots of pies in terms of policy, you know. But yes, so there is a driver there in terms of ammonia reduction, very much connected to the ammonia strategy.
Brilliant. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I don't think any of the members have any other further questions. So I really appreciate your time, your evidence, and taking the questions from the members today. Thank you, and wish you a happy Christmas.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Okay, members, are you agreed that the department proceed to make the SR and we will then consider it in due course subject to the ESR report? Yep. Okay, members, thank you very much. Okay, members, agenda item 7 is SL1, Shellfish Gathering Conservation Regulations Northern Ireland 2025. So I'm going to refer you to the pack, starting at page 42 for the SL1, the draft SR and the explanatory memorandum. The department intends to make this SR under the negative resolution procedures to introduce a closed period each year to prohibit the taking of periwinkles from the intertidal area during the period of the 1st of January to the 30th of April in any year. So I now welcome the following officials from the Marine and Fisheries Division to the meeting and invite them to brief the committee. We have Mr Gareth Dillon, the Deputy Director, and Mr Patrick Smith, Policy Officer for Sea Fisheries Policy Branch. Thank you very much for your attendance and feel free to brief the committee. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So the draft statutory rule to which the SL1 relates contains only a small number of provisions and amounts to a single page. The SL1 comprehensively sets out the Department's intention to make the Shellfish Gathering Conservation Regulations Northern Ireland 2026. By way of background context, the hand gathering of shellfish in the intertidal areas in Northern Ireland is currently unregulated, save for the Belfast Corporation Act 1930, which specifically prohibits shellfish gathering along the shores of Belfast Lough. In 2022, the Department consulted on the intertidal hand gathering of shellfish in Northern Ireland. This consultation outlined a range of potential management measures designed to, amongst others, protect shellfish stocks in the intertidal area from unsustainable exploitation. This statutory rule will prohibit the taking of periwinkles by any means from the intertidal area in Northern Ireland from the beginning of January to the end of April in each year. The policy objective of the regulations is to safeguard the periwinkle stocks by prohibiting the taking of them during the peak spawning period in each year. Other reasons for the management of the periwinkle fishery include the protection of sensitive habitats such as seagrass and mudflats, protection of ecosystems from large-scale removal of a food source for dependent species such as seabirds, and the protection of other marine species such as seals, which may be sensitive to disturbance caused by the regular presence of shellfish gatherers. One of the questions in the 2022 consultation sought comments on a proposed closed season from January to April of each year, and of the responses received, 86% were supportive of that proposal. The SL1 outlines the first step in regulating the intertidal fishery by legislating for a closed season during the peak spawning period for the periwinkles, and subject to the committee's consideration of this SL1, the intention would be to make the statutory rule early in the new year to come into operation in late January or early February of 2026. I'll pause there and I'm happy to take any comments the committee would have.
Thank you very much. You've just piqued my interest. You've 86 positive responses to your consultation and survey. How many negative ones?
It's 86%.
86%. So in terms of the negative ones, just to outline for the committee, who is it going to impact on negatively, and what difference does it make to? Is there an indigenous industry, or is it not?
There is anecdotal evidence that there is some gathering of periwinkles. We believe that it's approximately 400 tonnes per year. Would that be right, Patrick?
Yeah, one of the years recently there was records of 400 tonnes that were processed. So it's quite a, in terms of economic value, it's well north of £3 million at least, and that's conservative.
We believe that the greatest market for that would be export.
Okay, and in terms of the consultation responses, is it the negative ones, which would amount to about 14%, possibly top at most, is there likely to be any economic impact in terms of any industry? Any negative impact, or is it?
In terms of the export, the greatest market for the export would be France, and that is over the winter period. So we don't believe, although it will have some impact, we don't believe it would negatively impact upon that aspect of the export market.
Okay. I note that there are no close seasons for periwinkle harvesting in Wales, Scotland and the Republic of Ireland at the moment. And it does say in the brief that we've got that it says here the common periwinkle is a small marine gastropod that is abundant in intertidal areas. But part of the purpose in bringing this through is to secure the species. If it's abundant, what's the necessary provision then to take this action?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's to ensure that there's sustainability in the long term for the fishery, and it is in response to scientific evidence and recommendation from AFBI.
And my final one is, you mentioned Belfast Lough, and Belfast Lough has obviously been in the news recently in regard to pollution by NI water in particular, and the issues in there. Is there any signs of that level of pollution having an impact on the periwinkle, or is the periwinkle useful in this space for? Is it a natural sort of filter type, and then do they play a part in our ecological circle in Belfast Lough?
It's a good question. I mean, that science that AFBI produced was solely in regard to Strangford Lough. I mean, the act that Gareth talked about was an old 1930s local government act that is preventing hand gathering on the shores of Belfast Lough. So in terms of the question as to whether there's any impact on that, we're not quite sure on that one, but the science behind the AFBI report was focused on the inner Strangford Lough.
Okay, and just final one for me, are there any other species the department might seek to protect in this way, or are all other species already protected? It's
an unregulated industry. The department is required to publish hand gathering of shellfish fisheries management plan by December 2027, and that, in addition to periwinkles, within the scope of that could include native oysters, razor clams, blue mussels, and cockles.
Yeah, we've covered the native oysters piece. I mean, there was a big story in around that where how prevalent they would have once been, but not so. So that would point to the need to manage these native species. So thank you very much for those. Declan, please.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. The ban in England is from the middle of May, the 15th of May to 15th September. Why is there different dates for here?
To be honest, we're not aware of why that is. We know that it's in relation to a bylaw in England. It's quite an old bylaw, but the period identified for the purpose of the present regulation or draft regulation was identified by AFBI as the peak spawning period for NI.
Yeah, if I could just add to Declan's question there, we did some follow-up in regard to that closed period as to why it differs, and pursuant to the submission of the SL1, we've now found out that bylaw is going to be revoked. It's a really old bylaw in that particular IFGA in the southern region of England. So,
yeah. And there isn't a ban like this in the south of Ireland. Are you aware of any plans for such one, or have they identified the need for such a ban?
No, I mean, this has obviously come out of the 2022 consultation on the hand gathering of shellfish in Northern Ireland. I mean, obviously there's quite a lot of interest from environmental side of things, the economic value of the periwinkle fishery, and also there's a health and safety aspect to it as well. So there are a number of proposed measures that were consulted on, but this is the first one. This is the initial step that we're taking in terms of having a closed season for periwinkles, because we have the science to back that up, unlike the other stocks that the chair had mentioned. And Gareth's answer talked about 4 additional species in the proposed FMP, but we don't have the science for that yet, and that's something that we'll be looking at.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Declan. John?
Chair, thank you. And thanks to you both for the information provided. I say respectfully to those that wrote the 1930s bylaw, if they're still around, and those who've clung to it, that any ban on hand gathering in Belfast Loch has not been massively successful over the years. I think there's ample local evidence, and instead of someone who lives relatively locally, that hand gathering has continued at pace. But more specifically, looking forward, I assume there was input amongst the 86% support from the public consultation for what is proposed, support from the environmental and conservation lobby for the regulation as it's envisaged. Can you confirm that? And confirm that there's scientific and research data to back up the proposed closed season and the dates around that?
Yeah, I mean, the consultation in 2022 was pursuant to the API report earlier that year, which was on intertidal hand gathering, and it focused on 3 sites in the Strangford Loch. But I mean, in terms of other areas where periwinkles are gathered, it's mainly in Strangford and maybe in other parts of the County Down coast, around past maybe Killock, St John's Point, etc. The 37 responses, there was 37 responses to that consultation, of which 86 were supportive of that closed period. And just to give you a feel for those who responded, they were members of the public, landowners, shellfish gatherers, university scientists, ENGOs, and some local council representatives. So that's a flavour of those who
Supportive, yeah.
Well, who responded to the consultation, but they're in the majority were supportive. Yeah.
And the data is in the AFBI report?
Yeah.
At the outset? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. Thomas?
Yeah, Chair, and the question is sure have been answered. It was in relation to what Declan asked as well, was why this closed period and why it was different from what it is in England, but that has been dealt with.
Thank you, Thomas. And Anya?
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation, in the draft SR, there is mention of exemptions, and I suppose under what circumstances would those exemptions apply if somebody was to apply?
Yeah, those exemptions are derived from the Section 14 of the 1966 Fisheries Act for Northern Ireland, and it's an exemption that allows the Department to grant permits for scientific purposes, propagation. So I know Mr. Blair would be familiar with that from his time there. So it's essentially, if AFBI were wanting to do some work in relation to that fishery, that they could go in. That's just an example, that they could go in during that closed period, and we would grant them a Section 14 permit if they requested that.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's not for this.
All right, okay. No problem.
Draw a line to this.
Members, any further questions? Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. It's greatly appreciated. And we wish you a happy Christmas, safe journeys. So members, are you content that the department proceeds to make the SR, and we will then consider it in due course along with the SR report?
Yep.
Content? Yes? Thank you. Thank you. Well done. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, members, agenda item number 8 is the Farm Sustainability Standards Amendment Regulations 2025. So I refer you to the pack starting on page 51 for the SL5 and the explanatory memorandum. We considered the SL1 on the 27th of November and noted this hour makes miscellaneous amendments to SR 2025 number 165, the Farm Sustainability Standard Regulations Northern Ireland 2025, which, after some consideration, we agreed on the 6th of November that we had no objection to subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules. However, a drafting error came to light which requires an amending SR as SR 2025-165 that made amendments to Commission implementing Regulation 809/2014, Article 74, failed to fully remove reference to the word negligence. The SR has been led under the negative resolution procedure, and it is anticipated that it will come into operation on the 1st of January 2026. So members, on the 27th of November we agreed that the Department proceeds to make the SR, and I will now put the question on the SR. That the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2025-191, the Farm Sustainability Standard Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025, and has no objection to the rules subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules. Are members agreed? Yes. Thank you, members. Members, before we move on, I'd like to propose that the Committee write to the Department to request a State of the Nation type update on the interrelation between statutory rules introduced this mandate. Whilst we consider SRs in isolation, the Committee is well aware of the complexity of the regulations and policies that farmers navigate on a daily basis, and I'm keen to have a clear picture of the relationship between the various obligations, grants, potential penalties that farmers face. The Department were very good in this space previously, if you remember. I think it was in around the bovine genetics, and I asked for a bit of a diagrammatic, and it was brilliant because it helped answer a lot of questions, and that's literally what I'm after here. And again, if you notice, one of the questions that occurred to me in the evidence session before last was just to see if there was a crossover, and it's great to know if there is, and it's also really useful for us for efficiencies if there's not, and it can alleviate concerns that don't necessarily need to exist. Members content?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 9 is the Air Quality Common Framework. Members, I refer you to the pack for the following items. A briefing paper from Natural Environment Division starting at page 59. Response from the Department dated the 11th of November defining a significant issue, prompting a review, which starts at page 92. Air Quality NI website providing further air quality information, data and reports at page 94. And I also refer you to table papers to the RAISE Report Common Framework Overview starting at page 24 and the RAISE Report Air Quality Common Framework and Overview starting at page 65. So members, as part of our scrutiny of this common framework, for which DAERA is the lead department, we previously received a written briefing in September last year. This was followed by an oral briefing on the 16th of October when we heard the framework covers all relevant air quality legislation which relates to those powers returned from the EU and sets out how the four administrations propose to work effectively together to improve air quality. The Committee then agreed to return to the matter, and on the 13th of November we considered the Department's response to our query regarding what constitutes a significant event, prompting an exceptional review of the framework. So if you're content, the Committee will minute that this scrutiny of the Air Quality Common Framework is complete, as we all know that these common frameworks will be reviewed once finalised. Members content?
Yep.
Thank you, members. Agenda item 10 is the Departmental written briefing, the Marine Protected Areas MPA Strategy for Northern Ireland Inshore Region 25 to 30. I refer members to the pack starting at page 97 for that briefing paper. So with your indulgence, members, I will take a bit of time summarising these three briefings. Members, the Department has completed the public consultation on a reviewed Marine Protected Area Strategy for the Northern Ireland Inshore Region and has produced a synopsis report and a Marine Protected Area Strategy for 2025-2030. These can be found in the pack starting at page 102. Northern Ireland's first MPA strategy was published in 2014 and focused on the Department's commitment to establish and achieve a network of well-managed MPAs that contributed to the conservation and improvement of the marine environment in the inshore region. Northern Ireland has now met the target of conserving 30% of its marine area by 2030, which now stands at 38% in the inshore region. However, since 2014, the introduction of global, international and local agreements, laws and strategies has led to a review of the strategy to highlight the shift in focus from the creation of to the management of that network. The strategy is consistent with the position in the rest of the United Kingdom, the EU and internationally. The UK as a whole has 374 MPAs, covering 38% of UK waters. The Republic of Ireland aims to expand its MPA network from 13% to 30% of Ireland's maritime area by 2030. And if the Committee is content, the synopsis report and the MPA strategy will be published on the Department's website. The Department will then outline its plans for the protection of key marine species with the publication of Northern Ireland Seabird and Elasmo Branch Conservation Strategies. That's the first time I've used that word. Do you have any comments, or are you content to note? Content to note. Thank you, members. Okay, members, agenda item 11 is a departmental written briefing on the significant water management issues, report and consultation. So members, I refer you to the pack starting at page 189 for the briefing paper for the Marine Fisheries Division, providing an update on the significant water management issues report and associated public consultation, which is a key development of the 4th cycle river basin management plan. And a copy of the report will be provided to the committee prior to its publication. So members, as you are aware, under the Environment Water Framework Directive Regulations Northern Ireland 2017, the Department is required to review and update the river basin management plans every 6 years and produce and consult on the SWMI report, which presents the current ecological status of surface waters, groundwater chemical status, and further information providing an overview of water quality of the local management areas within each river basin management. 2 consultations were launched in 2025, impacts on the water environment, on pressures and water quality, and a 6-month consultation on the 4th cycle RBMP timeline and work programme, which will close on the 3rd of January 2026. The synopsis of responses for each will be shared with the committee. Members, the 2017 regulations require that each water body must achieve good or better ecological status and good surface water chemical status by 2027, targets which are incorporated into the Environmental Improvement Plan for Northern Ireland. However, in 2024, 29% of all surface water bodies achieved good or better ecological status compared to 31% in 2021, highlighting the need to take action to improve water quality. The other UK jurisdictions are either currently or will shortly launch their consultations of their SWMI reports. Cooperation will also continue with the Republic of Ireland, in particular the production of the Shared Waters document on managing shared waters, which will support the 4th cycle River Basin Management Plan. The Department also plans to commence work on developing a programme of measures involving cross-departmental collaboration and stakeholder input for the 4th cycle plan, which will be subject to an economic analysis prior to the publication by the 22nd of December 2027. Members of the committee will receive an oral briefing in early 2026 on the implementation of the 3rd cycle of the River Basin Management Plan, which was published on the 13th of June. Members, any comments to make? Are you content to note? Obviously, if you're following the news this week, you will see the very sad revelation that the levels of cocaine use are being picked up in our waters, which is not insignificant, and it's just further evidence of how the public message needs to get there in the wider public health space, and the reality of the challenges that we're facing into. That everything we do as human beings has an impact, and an impact that comes back to us, reverberates, impacts our not just our environment but our biosecurity as well. So members, any other comments to make on that? We'll be getting a brief early in the year. John, do you want to?
Just to say that, it's clear that this is a deteriorating and not improving situation, and the one that has to be taken seriously, and no doubt committee will when we get this pending briefing. But I'm wondering if it might be useful at that point just to, you mentioned not long ago there, Chair, about cross-referencing various reports, SRs and pieces of work being done. And I'm wondering if when we get the report on the River Basin Management Plan, if we can, at least to some degree, cross-reference it with the work of the report that we've just considered around the marine area, because the 2 things are very closely linked. Our waters and rivers flow into our seas, and there's no question of the relevance there. So just for committee to note that when we come forward, it might be useful to try and ask on the River Basin Management Plan how that fits with sea and marine work that's going on also.
I totally agree, John. I mean, the input of this committee in terms of its departmental isn't just a scrutiny, it is about assisting, especially in important issues like this, and this is a very important issue for the committee, so I appreciate that, and if members are content, that's what we will do. Clark, are you content with that as an action then? Yes. Okay, thank you for that, John. Agenda item 12 then is the departmental written briefing, consultation on mandatory implementation of bovine electronic identification. So members, I refer you to the pack, starting at page 195 for the briefing paper, regarding the introduction of voluntary bovine electronic identification from July 2026 and the launch on the 16th of December of the 10-week consultation on proposal to make EID mandatory during 2027. Following public consultation, the Department will prepare a response document and proposed way forward. A copy of the draft consultation starts at page 201 of the pack. Members, the current procedure for cattle restraining and handling animals to visually read tags and manually record the data can have health and safety and animal welfare implications and can result in human error. However, EID ear tags contain a microchip programmed with the animal's unique identification number. It can simply provide efficiencies throughout the supply chain by identifying and providing real-time traceability information on livestock. EID tags are available in low frequency, high frequency and ultra high frequency options, and since 2010 they have been used to identify sheep across the UK. Northern Ireland must continue to adhere to EU animal health law, those rules on identification, registration and movement of livestock, and although the use of bovine EID is optional under the AHL, if it is to be deployed by a competent authority, AHL states that LF tags must be used. The Department proposes that bovine EID is introduced initially on a voluntary basis from July 2026, thereby providing time to transition and purchase the necessary hardware and software. Mandatory EID would then be introduced for all newborn calves at some point in 2027. Making EID tags available from July 2026 on a voluntary basis will also mean that when the bovine genetics project commences, tissue sampling tags for DNA testing of existing breeding animals and for DNA testing of newborn animals could also include EID technology. So benefits of the bovine EID include ease of use, quicker and more reliable identification of cattle in the event of disease outbreaks, improved transparency and efficiency in the supply chain, improved health and safety and reduction in human error. However, the full benefits are only realised when a large proportion of the national herd are identified with EID tags, which will be achieved after a period of several years of mandatory use of EID for newborns. Regarding the financial implications, EID tags are likely to be maybe £1.50 to £2 more expensive than the traditional non-EID tags, but the Department has stated it will consider financial support for herd keepers. When it becomes mandatory, I think that financial support should also be mandatory. Herd keepers may also wish to invest in the optional hardware such as tag readers and herd management software to support the EID. However, they have the option of reading and continuing to enter information manually, as EID tags will be visibly readable as well. Other operators such as markets and abattoirs would also be required to upgrade their IT systems and equipment, and if they do not already have this, they probably do because of the sheep already using them. For the Department, capital expenditure of less than £10,000 is required to upgrade the NIFAS database to incorporate and support bovine EID. And a full regulatory impact assessment has been undertaken and will be consulted on, which the Department states demonstrate the overall monetary and non-monetary benefits of bovine EID and exceeding any costs. As regards the legislative impacts, voluntary EID would require minor technical changes to existing domestic legislation through a negative resolution amending SR. However, the SR to introduce mandatory EID requires the adoption of new offences and penalties and is cross-cutting, and it will be subject to draft affirmative procedure. Stakeholder engagement found that key industry stakeholders welcomed plans to introduce bovine EID and were keen it is rolled out at the same time as the bovine genetics project to minimise the impact on herd keepers. Seems like common sense. The other UK jurisdictions have already consulted on bovine EID. Scotland will introduce it in 2026. England and Wales will see its introduction in 2027. The Republic of Ireland introduced mandatory bovine EID in 2022, and a scheme providing a subsidy to purchase EID tags ended in 2024. Are there any comments at this stage?
Just a quick one.
Yep.
Could we possibly write to the Department to ask them, have they examined, I suppose, the feasibility of an all-island approach to this issue? I know that there's a number of farmers, particularly in border areas, who regularly move cattle, obviously north and south, and it's become there is a real administrative burden on them to change tags. I suppose, again, just to ask them, have they looked at, or could they look at harmonisation on that front?
So we're going to ask a question in that space to see how that impacts members.
It's going to be, excuse me, it's going to be a cost of £1 or £2 per tag more. Tags are already £3 a head, so it's significant enough if you have a large number of births in your farm.
Totally. No, it is. So they've indicated that they will be looking at potentially, you know, some kind of a financial help there. The Republic had one that ran for 2 years. I'm not sure if they covered the full cost of it or whether it was the additional cost. But I think once they move into that mandatory space, they're going to have to give some assistance in there, William.
It would look that way.
Yeah. And I'm sure in 2027 we might even be hearing from you as a stakeholder.
Yes, it could be. Yeah.
Just for a final declaration of interest. Okay, members? Yep.
Yes,
Anything
no, that's
else?
fine. I
Content?
suppose one of the questions there is whether the technology will be able to read tags. You know, both jurisdictions will be able to use the same technology. You know.
It needs to be, it's an all islands thing really, because if you're moving cattle across the GB or whatever, then it needs to be harmonised.
One would have thought that if that worked out,
You would hope, William, but I think in your 17 years experience that hasn't always been the case.
Possibly.
Possibly. Okay. Members, if you're content, we're going to ask for your agreement that we go into closed session to receive a progress update on the dilapidation bill. Okay, members? Yep, we're now in open session, members, so agenda item...
Sorry, could we just clarify
okay.
any actions that have come out of that, please?
All right, yeah. So any actions, decisions from the closed session to note in open session? Clerk?
So there's a proposal there, just for you to read out, and then I'll run through the other
All right,
ones.
okay. I propose we forward the summary to the department if members are content. Before we move on then, yep.
So I take from there 3 actions, members. Committee staff will work with the Bill Clerk to draft a letter to the department seeking some clarification around the interaction between the proposed bill and existing legislation. And maybe, the proposal is to seek figures from the department, or if they have figures, on inherited versus speculative ownership, just to assist members with getting a bit of a picture about how that differently might impact on those groups. And then the third one is to request that officials look at other legislative examples where maybe a private sector equivalent to community asset transfer maybe exist in legislation, or there is some sort of facility in legislation for assisting community groups in having access or options anyway to take some sort of ownership or time with buildings that would come under this bill.
Yes, the community use clause that
Yes.
that was referenced here by witnesses earlier in the evidence gathering session.
We're going to tell this bill is going to get quite a bit of traction with this committee. Members content?
Yep.
Okay. Happy enough, Clerk?
Yes,
Good enough?
happy enough. Thank you.
All right, guys, in terms of agenda item 14, then that's correspondence. I'm going to propose that we deal with the correspondence by exception. There is a correspondence memo for reference at page 235 of the pack, and I'm asking if members are content to note the correspondence as presented. Members content? Thank you. We will look at agenda item 15. Is the forward work programme. There is no forward work draft programme in the pack, and the draft will be issued to members by the end of this week, members. Agenda item 16 is any other business. I have one item I want to bring up. I should have brought this up in Chair's business, to be honest, but I'm bringing up any other business because I've received a few more emails on the topic. Okay, members, so the item I'd like to bring up just with your support here is that in terms of where we are with Blue Tongue at the moment, I'm not sure if you picked up, but there was the day before yesterday, the department updated the advice on that, and it's a slight improvement in terms of movements and things. So that's useful. That's good news. But it's really important we stay vigilant. But what I'm receiving now is communications from sheep farmers as they move speedily towards lambing season and what the impacts are on them. Some of them aren't impacted, but they aren't necessarily totally aware of that. And I know that this committee has asked and will work with the department in terms of the information that's available. I'm just going to ask members if they would support me in just contacting the department on the evolving situation and the need for not just the communication, but the assess the communication, particularly in and around the sheep farmers. I know this is in cattle at the moment, but sheep farmers particularly are being impacted, and small farms are kind of nearly being hit harder because they rely on other help, perhaps, so members content, Clerk, and this isn't a wordy. This is just because I think we'll all be getting an influx of emails, telephone calls and messages from those that are impacted. So it's just in terms of the comms piece, it would occur to me that some people are still uncertain even when they access the information on the DAERA site. So it might be just dedicated staff that might be available, by telephone or something like that. I think some of that is already in place. But that confidence in around there, because as we know, farmers don't take a break at Christmas. If there's lambing to do or calving to do, they still have to do it, William.
That's what done.
You'll actually be looking your Thursdays back up here again, because you'll not be getting the day off at the farm.
Are you seeking a response from the department, or we?
Confirmation, yeah, well, confirmation and just whatever actions that they're putting in place. Have any other items of business and any other business, members? Okay. The date and time and place of the next meeting will be on Thursday the 15th of January at 10 a.m. in room 21. And
Janice in the chair.
with Janice in the chair. Janice will be returning. So James will be no more in this committee. And Janice will return. Okay, the committee meeting is now closed.